delegation, you know.
Oh, okay, get started now. Okay, I will call this meeting to order at 10:01. Ask for adoption of the agenda first. Are there any additions? Mr. McKay?
I'll make a motion to accept that as presented.
Okay, and before we vote on it, I would like to add 7.4, a discussion on lease land rentals. There are no further additions. Mr. McKay has a motion.
What type of rental?
Lease land. Okay. All those in favor of the agenda approval? Carried.
In favor.
Okay. Adoption of the minutes from the March 23rd meeting. Everyone have a chance to check them?
Go ahead.
Mr. Jenner? Yes. Jenner moves the minutes be approved. All those in favor? And carried. Okay, we have a delegation coming in at 10:15, is it Quentin now? Okay, correct. So it's been moved up, 10:15. Reports, 5.1, page 3, or page 6 of your package, the ASB administration report. Quentin?
Highlights, I guess, your seasonal staff is in the progress of getting hired on. Avian flu has hit the news pretty big. Mountain View County, Warner County, Cardston County, Painter County. We now have Camrose, Wetaskiwin, Bee Hill, Winoka County having avian flu in their county. CFA is working close with us to let us know as soon as possible when we have a positive. So that's been pretty high in the news. While Boar, our agreement is signed with the province. As we all know, our name got released, and it's been a continuous phone call saga with everybody from Vancouver Island all the way to somewhere in Saskatchewan to come on board. Classroom Ag program, only have one school sign up. So we'll be in the Buy More school for that one as well. Redoing some policies just as per normal.
Just got a quick question for Quentin.
Sorry?
On that. What grades was that ag?
It's typically 4 to 6 is what they
Surprised me.
what they direct it towards. But this is the same program that's been around for how many years, right? So I know they've been trying to get new curriculum on agriculture in the classroom. And something tells me they were driving that one towards the grade 8-9 stuff, but I don't know that for sure yet. But yeah, this classroom ag program is typically a grade 4 to 6 is what they, and I mean, we're just coming back out of COVID and stuff. We normally have 4 or 5 classes a year kind of thing. So, but we haven't had one for probably 3 years.
Okay.
A little nervous actually.
Typically, do the town schools take you up on this, or is it mostly the rural county schools?
No, usually every year we're in town at one of the schools.
Okay, that's good.
But it's usually 1 or 2 high rate schools. And then either Watha or Erskine typically sign up. Bymore's been a while since we've had them. Big Valley is one of our last ones we did.
You know, I think it's really good.
Because there's some of the young kids, even in these areas here, they don't actually live on the farms.
Yeah.
Mr. Gender?
I guess I was just gonna make more of a comment, when Trudeau's kind of talking about the 1 billion trees that are gonna be planted, is this part of it?
Maybe. I think it'll be, what was I told? I think 42 trees we'll put in for Bymore. Okay.
A little ways away from a million.
42, 49, so we're helping out.
It's a contribution.
Every kid and teacher will get a tree to plant. We'll help them plant them. So our chemical jugs last year were not picked up at the regional landfill. They had a breakdown in their chipper or something. So the chipper came out over the Easter weekend and got about half done and had a major breakdown, so they left again. But the guy's not really worried. He wants to bring a compactor in and try it out here. If you remember at the conference, they were talking about a new compactor system.
Right.
So they want to try and compact out of ours, which is good. They've emptied a bit. We have probably 6 gravel truck fulls worth of chemical jugs to haul in yet. We couldn't get them in, it was so full. So this gets us a bit of room for that spring spray season. So that's all right. Working on some annual reporting for the ASB grant. And still trying to figure out a few agriculture business tours for Ag Service Boards to tour. The idea was 4 to 6 per year, so we'll see what I can arrange. If you guys got any ideas or something you'd like to go see, we'll put it on there.
Go see the new brewery in town. It's agriculture related, isn't it?
Well, you need 3 or 4 hours.
So it's a 5 o'clock tour.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds.
No overtime though.
Oh yeah, no overtime, no.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question about the wild boar. So the bounty that's on the wild boar, now, how does that work? It's $75, right? And then do we get reimbursed that money from the Provident Plus administration fee?
75 in, 75 out.
That's interesting. Okay. It's programmed by the province, what we administrate and have to deal with, but, okay. There you
The
go. With our tax dollars.
So the policy for review is actually coming up. If you'd like to see some changes, by all means, now is the time so we can tweak it and present for council in May. You see a fit.
Mr. McKay, you have something?
On that topic too, wild boar, do we really have any wild boars in County Stellar? Because I've got people coming, or from the south area wanting to come up to shoot the dang things, but I have no idea where they might be
Do we have wild boar?
in the county.
Do we have wild boar at large?
Okay, yeah, that's what I mean.
We have a Boar farm, actually,
Mile from Bymore.
Yeah, I was aware of that, but I didn't realize that, yeah, I knew that we had farms here, but not wild boar.
Yeah. So there was a farm before I started this. It go back to like maybe 2000, 2004. There was a farm around the Warden area that whatever bankrupt decided to get out, whatever it was, open the gates and let them go, from what I was told. So there was some, but it sounds like they shot them all, but.
Neighbors solved that problem.
And that's what I hear a lot about. Now, that being said, it was brought to my attention this morning, there's a new Facebook page, Stettler Area Hunting something on Facebook, and some local guy shot what he claims is a wild boar yesterday, and he's bringing me the ears. Just before the meeting started, I got a voicemail saying he wants to bring some ears in, so I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks.
As far as inviting hunters in to hunt wild boar, we don't have a problem.
Right.
Yeah. Even if there was 20 on the loose, to bring in all these guys to hunt wild boar, you'd cause more chaos.
Absolutely.
As long as the neighbors and the farmers are watching, if they see one. The thing that people have to remember is someone coming in from the south or from wherever, like I said, is getting phone calls from Vancouver Island.
Right.
When they come to hunt on Mr. Clark's land, they have to get his permission.
Yes.
It's no different than hunting coyote, no different than hunting deer. So they have to have permission.
And wild chickens.
They were just under the
There is no
impression,
wild chickens out there.
They have to
sign
Cross the
an
road.
affidavit
I'm gonna ask to see that permission. Right, and they're gonna tell me where this animal was destroyed and submit me ears. And then I'll submit them to the province for testing. If it comes back positive for a wild boar, I'll give them their $75.
They were just,
And I'll probably put a flag on whatever quarter that was, right? I'll have a pin marking one was taken here. Maybe we do have a few on the loose in this area.
they were just under the impression that we had a problem and they were willing to come up and get at it, but.
What the media,
Get kicked out.
Exactly, so.
That's what the media kicked out. MD of Peace and Stetter County have a problem. And like I told everybody that phoned in, we've been signing an agreement every year since 2008 when wild boar became a pest on the Agricultural Pest Act. We do this as a precaution for a just in case. In Mr. Nyberg's wild boar farm, if a pen broke loose, he can phone his friends and he can put something out to me saying, need some help, I got 25 on the loose. I have a way to pay him back. And we get reimbursed. When the county writes a check, the province writes me a check. We're out a bit of administration.
For the record, I do not have any pigs.
You know that Mr. Clark, I'm using,
Not point of clarification, neither do I.
I forgot we're streaming, I just used names as a, for example.
Got that crystal clear now.
I am a sheep farmer.
Yeah. Mr. Gender?
That was my question. Okay, how do you determine, like, when they bring in a set of ears, whether they're wild boars or domesticated, other than you said, okay, they send them away to get tested?
I don't determine. That is done by a DNA test. And I don't know how they do that. Or where they do that. I send it to the province and it gets done.
They talk into the ear and it depends on what it says back.
English doesn't speak.
Brendan,
Mr. Grover?
what about half-bloods? Will they be able to tell you when the DNA comes back if they're a half-blood or full-bloods or if they have any wild boar in them, they're classified as a wild boar?
Tell you what, when I get this set of ears and submit them, I'll let you know what they tell me, because if these ears come in for me to submit, this will be the first set of ears the county of Stetter has ever received. So I have no idea yet.
We'll be listening.
That's a good indication we don't have a problem. This is the very first set since 2008. Okay, continue with your report.
so yeah,
And now you see starts on page 8, what we do throughout the fall and winter is start tracking brushing projects, remarking down hamlets, parkways, gravel pits, anything we want to look at for weed control or brush control. So that's what you see for the next, until page 12, are the projects that we're lining up for this season. And some are already in progress because it tracks rentals on our traps and our pumps and whatnot as well. But you'll see that we're starting to mark down and plan out some projects and get things under control. So that's something that from now until November-ish, this will be part of the package, and you'll see kind of where we are, snapshot in time.
Any questions for Quentin's report? No, I'll ask for a mover. Mr. Clark?
I'll move it.
Okay, I'm sorry, Dave, we got Larry on this one first, but we'll catch you next.
Good.
All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, it is 10:15. Do we have our guest speaker online yet? Okay, we'll move to the next item of business then. 6.1, the pest control policy on page 13 of your package.
So, if you guys recall a while back, Mr. Stuhlberg asked about trapping on right-of-ways. So what I did was I used our pest control policy, and I found where I thought was the best fit to include trapping on right-of-way as per the Pest Control Act, Agricultural Pest Control Act. As of right now, this is a no financial implication to the county. What it's doing is allowing trappers to use our right of way. They just have to make sure that they're a registered trapper and that they carry insurance. And then when they sign this up, we'll have a hold harmless agreement, so if it's in the winter time and we're winging snow and we catch a funnel trap for muskrat or a snare for coyote and damage it, we're not at loss. You put it here at risk.
Okay, I see there's no mention of muskrat, it just says beaver, so, but it does apply to muskrats as well?
I worded it so that it controls nuisance animals under the Agricultural Pest Act. And it controls pests. So they can trap wild boar, or they can trap Norway rat, or they can trap muskrat. Because I use the words pest and nuisance, we can change, the province can change the Agricultural Pest Act to include or disregard whatever animals, and this is still inclusive.
Oh, that's good, very good. Any other discussion on including this clause into our
One
pest?
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Those snares that they use, for supposedly catching coyotes, they have their number, their trapper's number on them. And if they happen to snare a dog by mistake, is that always recorded, or how's that work with your permit you're allowing on right ways?
I don't know how that works because that falls under the Trappers Act with the province, so they're regulated that way. I can find out and get back to you.
Okay, sounds good.
Not picking me up.
And lots of times, I guess, those snares are hooked to the farmer's fences, which are on private property, likely not on the right of way. But anyway, I guess you're looking further into that one. Okay. Anything else? If not, I guess we'll have someone approve the policy with the amendments. Mr. Nyberg?
I will make the motion that we approve the policy 3.6 pest control
Okay.
as amended.
All those in favor?
Favor?
And carried. Now we have our speaker online. Okay, welcome, Grant. I'm Les Stuhlberg. I'm the chair of the ASB today. And can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Unmute yourself.
Oh, I can hear you just perfectly. Is that better now?
Yeah, now we can hear you as well. So welcome, Grant. I'm not going to attempt your last name because I'll probably pronounce it wrong. But anyways, we'll do introductions here so you know who you're speaking with. And I'll start over with Mr. Gender on the far side.
Ernie Gender, good morning.
Paul McKay,
Justin Stevens.
Les Stuhlberg, board chair.
James Nyberg.
Quentin Beaumont, Manager of Agricultural Services.
Derek Kushner, Manager of IT. Larry Clark, Board Member.
Okay.
Then you've got Councilor Grover.
Yeah, and we have Councilor Grover, or Board Member Grover. He is joining us by telephone today.
By Zoom, yeah.
Okay. And then go ahead, Grant.
Oh, okay. Did you want me to get started?
Sure. Yep. Introduce yourself and who you're with and your presentation. Sure.
Okay. Hopefully I can, with the help of Quentin, be able to share screen and everything with you. Grant Lestuca, and I've worked with Alberta Ag for over 30 years in forages and started as a district agriculturist even. So familiar with the Stettler area and also farm a little bit with my wife and family here at Innisfail, east of Innisfail. And at the present time, I'm retired, as you know the stories, I think, and working with the Forage and Applied Research Associations on an as-need basis, and also with the Union Forage Company, and doing a lot of volunteering on some committees, and I'll touch on one, and that's on the rotational grazing program coming forward. So I'll try to share my screen and see how this goes. And Quentin, is that showing up properly?
You bet. We can see it
All right.
clear.
Well, I hope I'm going to do the talk you're looking for, because what I do, I've done so many talks on drought over the years, and people, to me, I always have to go back to, how is this different? Because in my own mind, I think we need to. So we're looking at a forage situation this year, as Quentin, I hope briefly we talked. And I'll try to touch on a few things because this all comes together to me and how I'm seeing it. And hopefully that'll be of use to you. I've done a number of these talks across the province and in other ways this year already. And so certainly I'm armed and dangerous when it comes to this information. I've got to thank Dr. Ralph Wright from Alberta Agriculture for helping me here, and great resource with climatology and everything. So when we start looking at the county of Stettler and where do we fall, I'll back us up one. Where do we fall in this? He felt that the best thing for me to do was to go ahead and show you more of the standpoint of this index, because others can be quite deceiving. So once we start looking at Stettler County, what we see in 180 days of accumulation is a situation where it's moderately low. It says once in 3 to 6 years. So that's in fact the situation here, and you can see there's a large area that falls into that case. So what happens when we in fact go one more down this slide? We'll back way. I just wanted to look at this one, and this is the 365 one, and knowing that it is in fact an area where we're seeing now very low, once in 12 to 15, 25 years is the majority of the county of Stettler. And we've also got a pocket 25 to 50 and a real scary one. Once in 50 years is even over here on the very edge. So that's the weather you're looking at over 365-day accumulation. And Dr. Ralph Wright with Alberta Agriculture and our climatologist, and you can access that site at any time when you in fact put in Alberta Agriculture weather climate maps. And the thing about that that's scary is when you look at the US. And when you start looking at the US, you're seeing this SL. And short term, L is long term. And so it's a combination, as you saw, the forage that went into the US last year, disappearing in June because of subsidies and such, really took away a lot of inventory. And so the beef industry ends up being the reciprocator of that weather pattern in the US. And as you can see, that's the situation on April 20th right now. So it is going to be, again, a situation. I do not know if the US has any drought subsidy programs going this year or not, but it's very concerning because their situation is worse than ours. Dr. Ralph Wright wanted me to put this up. He said, Grant, the May to August weather is everything. And to be honest with you, April, May, June, July is when we get all these moisture events. That's when the majority of accumulation comes. And in fact, if we don't get it then, we're in a pickle. So the idea is that we can look at a lot of things and expect these situations to not have the moisture, but we have to have it coming now. And if we don't have it coming now, we're in big trouble. And the reason we're in big trouble for forages is because perennials start growth earlier. And the majority of our perennials grow earlier, and we can say, yes, native range is different. We can say tame pastures are different, hay stands are different, and they are to degrees. And I can sure talk that through. But the fact of the matter is that June 21st day, the mineralization in the soil, if we don't fertilize, so much is so important right then. And the key thing for people that are managing grazing or hay stands well is that, yes, it's just like those that are familiar with the cattle industry know, compensatory gain in cattle, vigorous plants compensate. There's a bit of mineralization there in the soil that occurs without the moisture present for plant growth, and maybe with the cold in the fall when it doesn't have the warmth. But the reality is that we can get a compensation. The big thing here is this age-old story, and it's actually Hugo Gross from Brandon made this comment back in the 70s. And so don't get started too early, and I'll build on that in a moment. So how is this drought different from others? Because really when it comes for it, one could say you should be planning. Well, I don't quite look at it that way. I do and I don't, because I've been around a long time and I've been parts of this through the course of years. And so I'm going to look at it in light of what is really happening a bit, because yes, droughts are all part of what we have. But the reality is we've got more problems than that. In my mind, that's why this needs to be looked at with care and consideration. And when I went into some of that, we've got a situation where our alternative forages are very costly. And our inventory, if we can find it, is hard to find. So when it comes down to it, what do we do here in terms of buying more hay or such? And one of the things I'm going to caution everyone on is that we'll look a little further at this, and we'll look at the fertilizer side of it. From the fertilizer side, the bottom line is I'm going to tell you probably fertilize. If your soil test tells you you're deficient, if you did a soil test, what is most deficient should be addressed. And remember, to me, it's not just nitrogen, it's always a ratio. And it's probably a ratio of phosphorus and nitrogen. It could be sulfur, potassium with it. But I really would like to know what I've got there and addressing it from deficiency. The reason why is work that Dr. Molly did at Lacombe and others. Well, and I want to qualify it because am I coming through okay, Quentin, and everything? I'll just ask.
Yeah, you bet. You're loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. This figure is something that's arbitrary. Be careful with it. Because when I'm looking at a hay stand that is grass, I can potentially get more. If I'm lacking moisture, of course, it's hard to get all this. So it's really when situations are quite reasonable that 1 pound of actual nitrogen gives us 30 pounds of forage dry matter. And that's easiest on a grass hay stand that Dr. Molly did so much work on at Eckville and Lacombe, and that's not Stettler. The reality of it was that we see other situations, and I've seen this number in some pasture work, and I'd even say it could be lower on overgrazed pastures, because, and remember, address the shortfall. So what is most deficient? If we don't know what's most deficient, then we do need, and we know that fertilizer pays, and because forage is in such short supply, and if we could get fertilizer, when I looked at it from about a $1,350 per ton, and that's ton, I should say, 2205, so $1,350, it's easy enough to see the cost of dry matter, if in fact I'm getting, I can't get this cursor where I want it, if in fact I'm getting that at 30 pounds of growth for every pound of nitrogen, something in the range of 4 cents a pound to produce it. Now I've still got to take into account of what does it cost to harvest it, and that's another 4 cents a pound probably on top of that. But if hay's going for 10 cents a pound, or if it's out on a stand that's well managed with manure and urine going back from animals, then it's in fact a little more sound of thought, because it doesn't just disappear. This is urea, so I am counting on you putting it on before a moisture incident that's adequate enough. And if a person is using a product to help it be more stable, you only have a short window of time for that to be stable. So I'd really say time it to moisture as best as you can and consider the stability of using a stabilizer product is something that I would consider thereafter. But you can see we're getting maybe on a hay stand where we are going to be around that 10 cents a pound if we get adequate moisture, but where are you going to find feed from? And it's also going to be an investment in the vigor of plants, because this is the one thing that happens. We do know that fertility can do some things for us. It is an investment in the type of plant, and that's why I talked to you about a broader fertilizer perspective, because we can keep the smooth brome in when we put a phosphorus with this nitrogen. We can contribute to more creeping red fescue or Kentucky bluegrass if we don't. So I'm encouraging, in fact, people to look at both. Now, when I'm looking at that, getting an earlier start in spring on growth, that's because plants are more vigorous, and we'll deal with that a little later. But a number of positives from the fertility side. Now, why are things different? And I relied a little bit on this because I know there's been a lot of work dealing with emotional health out on farms. And why do you think we're dealing with emotional health out on farms? There's lots of reasons for it. And in this look of Dave Pratt's, that balance is something that can't be forgotten or not for long. And I relied on some of the work done by Darren Qualman, who did a bunch of work with the National Farmers Union, but he is a well-respected person. So if you're not a National Farmers Union person, you're still looking at a situation here where we can see the net income on farms has been very touch and go up until this last little bit. And the reality of this touch and go is a situation where there is stress on farm families and there isn't the money to invest in doing some of the things maybe that should have been done at times. The gross return gives us back very little in net. And that's because, as all of us know, the costs keep going up for the how much dollars per hour does it cost to repair something. And really, when we sell something, what do we get back after we pay our bills? The other concern I've got when I look at this is the Canadian farm debt. And this was according to StatsCan, and that was over a period of time adjusted for inflation. We can see debt load going up. We can see the fact that net income had gone down. And so that certainly adds to stress in what anybody is doing and how a drought falls into it. The other thing is when we look at some of what the cattle prices have done, and the prices took a tumble to a lower level, and I'd say quite coincidentally, but Cargill came into Canada here. Fewer packing plants and everything. So we're looking at the cattle business tied, because we sell our forage product largely through beef cattle in Canada and in Alberta a lot. We see a lower amount of dollars coming back to a producer. And so where the other graph was net income in general to farming, now we're looking at it from a perspective of the livestock industry. And one thing I wanted to do was taking it, in fact, to what I think most of you know what's happening in stores. Thank goodness we're getting a little more opportunities for local. And I know there's some people out there that are selling local products and everything, but the majority of us are in still the business where we take our product to town. And the fact is that taking our product to town has meant that it is still a tough story on the livestock side, and that tough story on the livestock side makes the drought even more impactful. When I look at the forage production, I want to say to people, it's not just if it doesn't rain, because we realize that, as my friend Gordon Hutton had done, forage production, and this was his determination, And Gordon had 35 years experience in forages. So again, very thoughtful approach that the species are important. Yes, if it doesn't rain, but also management is crucially important to it all as well. And that's maybe what we run into with an old hay stand. And we're saying, well, the decision to have an old hay stand now is in fact going to be giving us a situation where fertility and other things come into the forage picture, and maybe fertilizer now doesn't address some of the shortfalls as well as we'd like, because it's too much big a need, or species not even being present. The one thing that ties in here is said by Dr. Llewellyn Mansky, a gentleman who I spent some time with out of South Dakota, because I valued his learnings. So I went down and went to Dickinson, South Dakota, and spent a day with him to check it out and see if I really believed what he said, but he says half the reduction was precipitation, half of it was prior practices. So where this comes into the picture, in my mind, is in fact looking at it a little more thoughtfully. And as Pat Guptill had said, and I actually met him when I was down in South Dakota, so I spent some time with him, about an hour, and we really have to do everything we can to capture rain. And that's something that you're finding we don't, as much as you think. We evaporate more water than we think. And the other thing is, when we look at a pasture, we have to look at it in light of a combination of ours, as they comment. And that's where we'll dwell a little bit in a moment. But the reality of it is that as we're approaching it, and this is what just January, in a drought, South Dakota puts out this article. And if you go to it on the internet, you'll find it. The thing that bothers me is that when it comes right down to it, I think people have to sell cattle, and I hope they can sell them fast enough. And the idea behind it is we have to try to find a balance so that we're not going to be in such a big pickle that we're going to have to buy so much feed that is out of line, or graze our way down into a stand that is going to cost us in the future, because these are perennial plants. Just like those of us remember back when we were young and going out and partying at night and having a great time, the next day there was a little pain there. And the fact is, perennial forages set up growth in the fall. So when people say to me, we don't know what's going to happen unless it rains, I sold cows in December and took a bloodbath on that one. And I sold calves that are selling today, actually. And the reality of it is trying to get animal numbers down faster than some other people and more in line with what I think my yields are going to be. Because the key thing to all of this has to be a balance. And if we're not in balance in pastures, this is where you saw so much of it happen last year. And what really worried me is that when we come into an imbalance where we've got more animal needs in animal days of grazing, so we're just doing an example here. Animal needs, if I had 100 cows, I wanted to graze them for 250 days, that might be called 250 animal days times 100 days, 25,000. But if I look at my pastures this year and say, I can't see that. The reality is you better start planning for 175 maybe days of grazing. Or maybe you better start planning with 75 cows going for 250 days. If you don't, what happens is this, and this rest problem, when not dealt with, is going to be a huge hangover where there won't be compensatory grain by the plant. This pasture takes a long time to come back. And it, in fact, changes species where the ditch is probably smooth brome, and it might be crested wheatgrass in many places. Once you start to get out here, it's starting to become Kentucky bluegrass, more so quackgrass, not as drought tolerant either. And so our pastures change over time to be the species we didn't plan for. The key thing that we always talk about, and this is comments brought forward by Dr. Mansky, and now everybody's quoting them, but that leaf staging is Dr. Mansky's idea back when. And we need to let plants grow a solar panel to recover in spring before we graze them. 3.5 is native, 3 is a tame pasture, but the idea is this tells us grazing readiness of a plant. The dilemma with a Kentucky bluegrass or an overgrazed plant is it puts up a seed head for survival. It's crisis mode operation. It's not leaves with productivity. It's a few leaves on a stem. And so it's already going to be a not good story to begin with, but it is important to leave it at least that long. The other thing is fall time, and this is where some of the programs coming in might be helpful, because I think that some of the annuals people look to go into, and if you don't want to plant some of your annual land into a forage or grazing option, then the selling cows idea, selling yearlings, because in the fall, we know that a plant, if it doesn't have this as its inventory, it's just like me with my operating loan, getting it down to 0 before I start a new year. I need to prepare for feast or famine. These plants prepare for next year in light of 2.5 leaves per tiller, feast. Next year I've got lots of potential tillers with leaves on them, growth potential to cover ground, potential. If I don't get moisture, if I get an open winter, I'm going to lose some of that. But the reality is if I don't have this much, they start preparing for famine in August, September of the year prior, last year. The new rotational grazing program that the government's putting together might come in handy for some people, because if you do go through some of the process, you have to do a grazing plan. You might even have to do the webinar workshops to do a grazing plan, but the announcements aren't out on it, so it's late. Unfortunately, you have to get approval for it in order to do that. What's going to happen? Well, a body of parties, Farmers for Climate Change, the Canadian Forum of Forages and Grassland Association has also brought this forward. So, and what we've got is rural, and this is the new Alberta agriculture name that they've got out there for those, really when it comes down to it, I guess, to try to get help so that we've got, in fact, a results-driven agriculture. And we've also got a program that's funded through the OFCAF, we call it now, so acronyms everywhere, but it's On-Farm Climate Action Fund. Where that program comes in is the government has got $75,000, and it's going to go for fences and water systems and potentially, I don't even know if it's seed, but you have to put in 15%, the government puts in 85%, and this is their budget announcement over a year ago, and it's the idea is trying to fund climate change. So I'll leave this with you. So Quentin, if you've got, I'll stop here. And if there's any questions, we'll go from there.
Okay, so any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. James Nyberg here. Talking about that fertilizer now, I just heard on the news that the government is looking at trying to reduce fertilizer usage by 30 or 40% or some crazy number. The idea behind that is you had talked about the stability factor in using fertilizer. Now, have you heard any more about that? Or I heard a comment from the Canola Growers Association basically saying, well,
there's no real study even saying that there's what the loss is. They're kind of grabbing out of thin air. So I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
I think with all of this, it depends is the answer. And the part about it is that it's practical in thought. How much it is in the end maybe is something that many can question. That is the third part of the program, and the Canola Council is part of delivering that program. So it's not the Forage one that focused on with it. But the idea of any of these programs are thoughtful in nature. And the fact is we know that nitrogen use efficiency could be improved because nitrous oxide is a very costly emission to the atmosphere. Methane's bad, but it's short-lived. Nitrous oxide's worse, and I can't tell you the factor number by it, but it might be 100 more than a carbon dioxide equivalent. So it's high. And so they're trying a little bit can mean a lot, James, I think is what they're saying. How much it's lost and everything, I guess one concern is the vertical tillage. And I know that the zero-till people from the past, when I still run into them, cringe a bit, because anytime we're aerating soil, we are oxygenating, we are liberating nitrous oxide as well. So that is the idea of the zero-till movement that was so strongly adopted. And now the idea on top of that is making sure that we've got nitrogen use that is in fact variable across landscapes, used in a soil test mindset, used with trying to maintain it as much as possible. But the answer of how much, I'm not quick to answer that.
Okay, I have one other one, Grant, too. So my daughter sent me an article, and for the life of me, I can't figure out where I put it. I did read it. It was about Canadian Thistle in Forage, and what they were saying, they had some good results on nitrogen fertilizer and heavily nitrogen fertilizer to basically quell the stem of Canadian Thistle. Have you heard anything or seen that report at all?
The work that was done by the University of Alberta many years ago looked at a number of angles on thistle. The competition side would always make sense, that the more we can compete for resources by feeding shallow-rooted fibrous grass roots to be competitive against the thistle for leaf area index, there would be some sense and sensibility to that. The fact is thistle is so deep-rooted that once the nitrogen diminishes, those plants are going to find their home again. And if there's manure from the land coming back on it, what I would encourage people to do is, yes, there are options for control of thistle and pesticides that can be used. University of Alberta showed mob grazing. And even, yes, you can teach animals to eat thistle and select it more as part of a diet. And that is another way of doing things. But yes, the competition of a balanced fertilizer program to address the grass needs simply means biological competition against the thistle. And that would, in fact, reduce it for time being. But later in the growing season, with the deep roots of thistle and moisture and other things, I'm not sure I could answer that.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Clark has a question.
Grant, Larry Clark, just the article was on their Stettler local web.
Sorry, what was that again,
There was
Larry?
an article about sulfur toxicity in cattle, and it was more on a feed basis when people are feeding canola crops, or it said some of the distiller type crops.
Yeah.
Do you have any updates on that in Alberta, or is it something that's happening in certain areas, or is it all over the place?
Check your water. I honestly believe that it's got to be water combined with high sulfur.
Okay.
There is, in fact, higher sulfur in any high protein. What is distillers' corns? When we look at wheat, these byproducts, they're higher in sulfur, you bet. Once we start looking at canolas that are grazed, they're high in sulfur. And so polio can be a factor. One of the things is manage, solution by dilution. And my thought is that the sulfur content animals can tolerate. It's something like nitrates. It gets blown way out of proportion. But my biggest concern is 2 wrongs are probably too much. And if I had high sulfur in water, I am feeding high sulfur, I'd be very concerned. I'd have to be on top of it if I was. But the reality of all of that is do ration balancing, sample your feed, know what you're feeding. And all I would put is, I wouldn't worry so much about it, but I would put a check in it based on water quality being crucial. After water quality, I would say that I'm also going to look at it from the standpoint of yes, higher protein plants will have, and these cover crops people are looking at will have higher amounts of sulfur in them, true. So cover crops with sulfur. I worry about interstitial pneumonia when animals are abruptly changed. So this is kind of taking an aside from this. More than I worry about sulfur issues or nitrate issues. But 0.4% of body weight is kind of the maximum sulfur level of intake. And if you're going to do it, try your best to minimize it, know what you're up against. Solution by dilution. Sorry, Larry, if I got that right, hopefully for you.
No, thank you very much.
Grant Les Stuhlberg here. A comment and a question. I really like the 3 R's. It's sort of a common rule of thumb. And in what my observations have been, especially in these drier years, where some producers tend not to move cattle from pastures until there's nothing left to eat in that pasture, which really defeats that 3 R's program that is probably more beneficial. And then my question is, on the grazing and forage that is solely used for hay in the fall after freeze up for cattle, does it harm the hay stand when you do that? Use it for late fall grazing with still leaving some cover for catching snow, but to take some of it off.
Leaving animals on pasture, the biggest challenge is recover. So rest is really not the comment. It should be recovery. When animals bite a plant then, if it's less than 50% of the plant, its solar panel is sufficient. It just keeps on rolling. And in ideal situations, even some growth will stimulate grazing. And that's a game that we play a lot of now with removal of about a third in a fast pass over pastures as being productive, because we're shifting the plant mechanism from development of a stem with seed head to switching its energetics that are going to be used to, in fact, creating more solar panels of pillars and growth close to the ground that are leaves and stems for later grazings for everything. And that is positioning and rest that is required thereafter. So get on it, get off of it. And if you're on it for any length of time, try to do something equal and different in opposite measure the next time around. So this pasture doesn't develop a system of addressing you. Instead, we want it to work for itself, not try to outguess you and not grow. When we're looking at the fact of grazing at any point in time, it affects the plant. Any point in time. The fact is, it could be snow catch, and you brought that forward. It's that smart. But it's also it's insulation. it's also leaf area. And part of leaf area is that so often we're looking at plants. And so the severity of grazing and the snow insulation properties to in fact leave adequate, and you'll often find in pastures that you graze with hooves driving frost down into the ground deeper, burying the soil in spots. I often don't find it killing the plants. What I find it, an orchard grass was something people always worried about in the West Country. I never found that. I found, though, it slowed growth in the spring. And I think what that simply meant is the plants had to respond in equal and opposite measure somewhat. We got to put cows somewhere. I don't say don't graze, but remember it's snow for insulation properties to maintain it. Unfortunately, hooves drive frost down. That's just part of what we know of our driveways around there. We have to have our water lines buried deeper. The thought is that it's still a leaf area. We do get some regreening of leaves in spring. And the lead tillers that give us that 1 to 2 week earlier growth in spring are what you're worried about losing in those stands that are grazed later in the fall. Just don't do the same field, the same time, in the same way every year. Rotate it too.
Okay, thank you. Are there any
Good
other
question, Les.
Any other questions? Well, if not, I think that wraps up our question period. And just like to thank you very much for your presentation. It was really informative. It was very valuable. Thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And thank you, Mr. Lestuca, and we'll catch you again.
Perfect pronunciation. And yes, call through the Battle River Research Group if you wish. And we are available, a number of us, of course, James, your brother Ted, if I got it right, I think. Yep. There's a number of us as specialists available, though you have to go through your Forage and Applied Research Association to catch us. And keep track of the Grazing Mentor program if you are, because yes, all 3 programs, the nitrogen use efficiency, the cover crops, and Grazing Mentor 1 are all ones coming this year. It's government money that has to get spent pretty quickly, so it'll come at you a little fast, I think. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Great. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could.
Quentin, when you're doing those, these come along, can you send them right to our calendar? If you see something like this come up, if it could come directly to our calendar. Unfortunately, it's not just any of the programs. Like if there is, like I did Grant's Forage. It was a Tuesday morning or something, and I listened to his program there. It was a good program. It was very similar to this one, but it was more directed for the spring or for the fall than it was for the spring. But I'd like to at least know that they're there. And I'll be honest, I see the email come through, but then I go and I forget to put it into my calendar, and so then the Tuesday morning's gone and I didn't get to see it in any of the workshops that we're part of, right? I know it's a pain for you, but it does hit 7 of us, and I appreciate all the work that you do.
And also for us to let anybody else know.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, right?
You betcha. That would be two requests to that.
Okay, good. Okay, next item on the agenda, 6.2, the G3 tour and the verbal report. Quentin.
Yes, Mr. Ken Rollheiser got back to me. He would love to show you his G3 plant. He has provided me 3 dates, May 10, 11, and 12, which May 11 is council. And May 12, I've got a joint health safety work committee meeting. But I could send you guys whichever. 10 o'clock in the morning for one of those 3 days is what he's proposing. The requirement is you bring steel toe boots, and he'll put a hard hat, glasses, and a vest on. But to tour his plant, you need steel toe boots. Are the CSA approved?
Absolutely.
Then you're fine.
Yeah.
So does,
Do any of those 3 days work, or am I looking a little later in the season?
The 10th works for me right now.
Yeah, works for me too. Okay, everybody else?
That's my preference of the three.
Perfect.
Okay,
I will
Book
May 10th?
for a 10 o'clock tour.
Where is that at again?
don't know, but
If we all meet here, I'll put it in my Google Maps.
There you go. No, I think that'd be really interesting. G3 is sort of a major thing in our area.
the tour take.
You know what, I'm not sure he said that. I'll find out for sure.
We could all have lunch at the Erskine Grill, just saying, little economic development for the small hamlet of Erskine.
I believe we
I
did
don't know if
that.
Gary,
That would be it.
I think we did that when we visited the Housestein Dairy that time. We did have lunch in Erskine, so spreads the business around.
If we are going to do that, you might just let them know to have a couple extra people kick
It's in your hands.
I'll
Quinn.
set that
Up
up.
for 10 o'clock on May 10th.
Awesome. Thank you. New business, 7.1, the wild boar policy review on page 16 of the package.
All right, so, nothing really has changed in our wild boar policy except for one thing. We used to have a bounty of $50 per set of ears. It is now $75 per set of ears. So what I've changed is that as long as the province is providing bounty, we're matching what the bounty is. That's the way I have it wrote as of right now. It's an in and out for the county. I'll pay up front, get reimbursed later. Any questions on that?
Really no other changes. Did anybody have questions? Any concerns?
Thanks.
So we just need a motion to adopt the review.
I'll give you that motion, Mr.
Is that
So this will get presented to council next week.
to present to council?
We have council.
Yeah.
We
We can't approve any policies here. What we do is recommend that we've reviewed and like what it looks like, send it on because it's a county policy to those other guys. And then I will explain to those guys what you guys have said.
Yeah, okay, so if there are no recommendations to change to this policy, Mr. Nyberg has moved that it be presented to council for approval. All those in favor?
There,
Carried. 7.2, the field visit, on page 20 of your package.
Province hates that we call it an audit. They like to be field visit. It's an audit. They want to know what we're spending their money on, right? So the province, actually Kelly Jackson, who is our liaison, is the one that conducts a field visit. I don't know if she's bringing other people with. Last time we had 3, actually. We had Dave McCully, Linda Hunt, and Ellen, his last name was totally escaped my mind. Anyways, the 3 from the province came down and evaluated us in 2017. I'm not sure if Miss Jackson is doing it by herself or if there'll be others with her, but she's proposed a few dates. One that works well for us is June 22, which is an Agricultural Service Board meeting date. So typically the way they set their day up, they'll come to the shop, they meet my staff, they ask them some questions, they do some documentation review. During our meeting time, they would come in, meet and greet with you guys for about an hour, hour and a half, question you guys a bit on Ag Service Board programs. You have a chance to ask them some questions. And then in the afternoon, I take them on a tour to show them some of the programs in progress. So if that works, I'd like to cancel the June 22 Ag Service Board meeting, but still keep a meeting time zone set up for you to meet the province and talk about the programs.
Okay.
So typically, how long do they want to talk to the board?
An hour, hour and a half.
Okay.
So I would set it up for about like 10:30 or so.
We'd have a bit of a quiz and meet and greet.
Have lunch, and then I would take them and tour them around.
I really want to see everything spending.
It's a pretty jam-packed day, yeah. As soon as they get here, we start going through the paperwork at the shop. They make sure that my inspectors are appointed, that they have ID, that they're looking at my chemical records, they're looking at my inspection reports. They go through the computer system, they go through my financials. Up until meeting you guys, if there's still more stuff they want to look at, we go back and look at it, and then we start driving around. But something they've changed a bit is I can submit a bunch of that stuff ahead of time so that they can spend more time actually looking at programs and not looking at paperwork.
And
What date did you say that was?
June 22.
22?
We'll be in that day anyway for.
I like the idea of maximizing the day and doing it.
And it doesn't tie up another day for you guys, right? You're in for what was supposed to be an Ag Service Board meeting followed by an MPC. So it's not taking another day away from feeding cows or seeding or spraying, whatever it is, or other work.
Mileage wise too. I mean, it's only one set of mileage for 2 meetings, so that's good use of resources. So I guess if everyone's in favor of having the provincial audit or visit, however you want to put it, on June 22nd, I'd ask for a motion. Mr. Stevens?
I'll give you that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Favor.
Carried. Okay. So we'll look forward to that visit. Okay, 7.3 on the agenda is the Soil Conservation Policy Review on page 22 of the package.
Okay, again, this is another one of the acts that, as a fieldman, I have to follow along and enforce. So this is, again, another review to bring into current updates. In my time here, I've never had to enforce the Soil Conservation Act. I have done probably 6 inspections that would fall under soil conservation, typically where somebody would have a pile of topsoil that they removed off the land to do something and not seed it to grass and it's blowing around in the wind, or I did have one field of cultivation where they didn't seed the following year, so it was blowing around. But it's more of a formality for this one, for sure.
You've been a busy boy in the 1930s.
Oh, yeah. That's what the majority of, and that's where actually this came from.
Yeah. There's a lot of real estate changing.
Actually, got a lot of our topsoil those years.
So does anybody see any changes that need to be put into this policy? If not, we would have a motion to present it as it is to council. Mr. McKay moves. All in favor?
Favor.
Carried. Okay, 7.4, in addition to the agenda, is the lease land rentals discussion. I don't know what other councillors, or board members, either or, but I did get a call on this one following our recent tender for lease lands that we just approved for 5 years. The person that called me had a couple concerns, I guess. One, he didn't think it was totally fair that the high bid didn't get it, that the existing land renter had that option of matching that bid. And the second thing, he was concerned, he didn't seem to think that rule was easily available to be found in our policies and stuff. So he thought that should be more clear, and he was just, I said I would bring his concerns for discussion to our board. And as we know, these are all been approved for the 5-year term. But if this board thinks that we need to review this, I guess we could start the wheels in motion. Any comments? Mr. Stevens?
I actually received a similar phone call. Just to clarify, the person that contacted me made it clear that after speaking to Quentin, they were well aware that the previous winning bid had that option. So they were aware of the rules before they submitted a bid. With that being said, they did feel that this was not the fairest way of going about this. So they weren't retroactively complaining. They just would like it a little clearer moving forward. And one more point that was brought up, which I believe I have mixed feelings on what the best route is, but one point that did become clear to me is it kind of leaves that loophole where the previous high bid can put in a bit of a joke bid. You can bid $1 and then you're not risking anything. You have the option to match it after the fact. And I think that takes away from the competitive nature of this. So that argument did carry some weight with it.
Mr. Nyberg?
So, can we bring the policy up and just, if, do we have it available? The only thing is, so do I have to, let's say, so I've been renting for the last 5 years. Do I have to put a bid in to?
Yes.
Okay, so I do have to have a bid put in to at least put my name into the first sale. Okay, so it's not like if I didn't put a bid in, but I've been renting the last 5, I can still put my bid in. Okay, no.
One point
Go ahead, yeah.
of food for thought is that the person that has been renting it, perhaps his bid should be within a certain percentage of the high bid. And so if he lowballs it so that he isn't being competitive, maybe then that'll maybe not be in his favor when they open the bids. I mean, that's just something to consider.
Sorry, I did, just trying to find your policy.
Oh, yeah.
What did you say, sorry?
I was saying perhaps something we could consider as a change for future is that the existing leaseholder, his bid would have to be within a certain percentage of the high bid, so that it eliminates that putting in $1, $10. I mean, you got to be competitive if you're interested in renting that again. So if it isn't within a certain percentage, if you're only going to bid $10, maybe then if someone bids a reasonable rate, you're not that interested. Maybe, I don't know, it's just a thought.
I can't stock these with sheep.
I'd like to talk when you get done.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Seems I have about 90% of that land is in my area. I've had both, we had one where he phoned me and complained about the price, and ending up he had it for, he put in a bit same bid as he did last time, but the other ones were so much higher than him that it wasn't feasible for him to rent it, so he let it go. I think it does have a competitive edge to it already. I don't think we have to start doing percentages and everything else. And then I had two phone me that the fairest way to do it is to put it out there for bid, and then that way it is part of their farming plan, and they either have a chance, like they can match the bid, or they can just let it go. And one in Big Valley there, a long time cattle rancher, he just let it go. He wasn't going to pay $3 or something a cut cap unit, and that's his prerogative. I think you have, I think you already have the keeping it in with it, but if you start doing percentages and stuff, I think it. I had 3 phone calls, and yeah, the one said he was rented it for $2,100 and what it brought $55,000 or something, which was just ridiculous. So I think the way they're doing it is fair enough. I don't think anybody put a dollar bid in on it anyhow. And if he does and the other person puts in 5,000, he's got to match the 5,000 or he don't get it anyhow. So that if he put in a $10 or $20 bid, it wouldn't make no difference anyhow. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I guess I'm having a hard time finding it.
Didn't you hear that?
Yeah, we got it, Dave. Thank you. Yeah, no.
Policy.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess I do have, as I've been going through here, I'm noticing there is nothing about the bidding policy in here, so I'm a little bit stuck here to understand where
go 1A.
all leasing offers will be presented to public for tendering process and outline it. Where does it say that we give somebody the opportunity to match bid?
So I was trying to go back through minutes because this was brought up right before the meeting and I can't find it. I don't know if it happened in an Ag Service Board meeting or a council. But back when I first started, that was what was said, was that the person who has the land gets opportunity to match it.
I mean, that's typical if you're
Maybe
putting
that
it
was-
by, I don't know. But
Maybe that was my CAO and said that. I don't remember how that came up, but that's always been the thing.
Yeah, okay. We have Ernie and then Larry.
Yeah, like when you do a timed auction, you have the option to begin with, okay, have a set amount. As the bidding goes up to it, and then at the last bid, if the person bows out, then you have an increment over top of that. I do not find it fair that we just have the option just to match. You're not doing your homework on it.
we don't have that option right now, Mr. Genders. What I'm seeing here is this is a napkin policy. And unfortunately, I think we're off board, or we're offside on this one by allowing these people to match. I think we are seriously offside on this one.
Yeah, we are.
Oh, I guess, does it matter? Okay, go ahead, Larry.
The question I had, and I had it here before, was the fact that if we have like also two words that say that you have to live within the county of Stellar, even if you're a landowner within the county of Stellar, you still should be eligible.
If you scroll down to point 7, point 7, properties can only be leased by a persons over the age of 18 and are a resident of the county of Stellar.
And in my opinion on that is if you're a ratepayer of the county of Stellar, that should be,
Then we gotta change the word, because it right now says resident. And that was something that I remember last time, that was a big thing that
Yeah, that's important.
either the board or council, I don't remember where those changes were made, that was a huge hitting point, is they wanted the county of Stellar to be the ones grazing this, they didn't want someone outside coming in.
but if you own land and you're paying taxes to the county of Stellar, whether you're a resident or not, you're still a ratepayer to the county of Stellar. You still have land, you still have assets that are.
We just have to make sure we word it whatever way you guys want. If you want it as a taxpayer or a resident, we've got to change that word, and that's all.
Yeah. Okay.
This is, I mean, we've got to wait 5 years, but.
I know, it's just something, that was something, and
We've already given out the leases.
yeah.
We have
You guys approved it, so.
Boy, did we screw up.
And you guys have the opportunity to.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I want this person to have it on every one of them. Now, something else that I wanted to bring up is that we had people bid, for example, one quarter, they bid $8,000 and something dollars. And so I phoned them up to say, hey, your top bid. They went, you know what? I'm out. And they pulled their bid. That's not fair either. So I don't know. I don't want to go back to the days of having to put a deposit down when you place a bid, but that would hold you accountable to the bid you place.
That might be the only way you do that.
I'm sure that's a logistical nightmare for finance, but wait, that's not me.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
How often does that happen where someone pulls back their,
Usually once every round, someone pulls their bid.
I'm just thinking the logistics side, do we want to spend $1,000 in administration to prevent once every 5 years?
I'd say it's very simple. They just accompany a check with it. And if if it doesn't go through, you just rip the check up. That's not unusual. That's nothing about putting the money in the bank account or anything. That's all it is it accompanied the check. It's very simple.
Fair enough.
Mr. Gender?
One other thing,
Go ahead, Dave.
this your pasture is for later pasture, and it becomes part of your plan or your thing. And so, you know, if you had it before and you were good and didn't overpasture, had the right amount, did all your stuff, that's usually the people you want to re-rent it, is it not? And they have to match the highest bid. If the bid's a couple $1,000s more, they have to buck up and match that bid or not. I think the system you have now is a half decent system. It might need a little fine tuning, but I don't think it's broken.
Unfortunately, Dave, we don't have that system.
Yeah.
We've kind of skirted it. It's been a napkin decision. Unfortunately, we 100% screwed up. We do not have it in policy.
Oh, I always thought it was a policy.
No.
It doesn't
I've
say
been
it,
here for 100 years.
it doesn't say it in the policy, but that's the format we've used for as long as I've been on council, is that the previous leaseholder had that option to match. And we can keep it that way if it's what everybody wants, but it should be clarified in the policy.
You're right, Les,
Yeah.
but I always thought it was there. Sorry, but
And Mr.
anyhow.
Gender, did you have something?
I also find okay resident, we've got some farmers that lived in town here, live in villages, and they've got a land base out there.
What I find though is, like in my area, we have a lot of absentee landowners where they buy land in there and they came from Acme and
Brooks,
and
all over hell.
There's all over the place. They're buying up land down there. And then I don't know if the locals would be real cheery if they got the lease land too, because it is a bit of a sore spot. They're not there to maintain fences and check cows and all the various other things. So it would open it up to those kind too, if they weren't residents of the county. But, you know, it seems to me we've got a lot of discussion going on this policy, and there are probably places that could be or need to be tweaked, and we probably have to bring this one back.
This is the time to talk about it, this is why it's here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the resident situation, so I buy a lot for $500 in Indiana. I don't know what we're selling lots for, but let's say it's $500. Now I can go and buy or lease, rent, however you want to call it, a quarter section from the county of Stettler, just because I've got a lot, or I got a lot at the lake, or I've got a lot in the hamlet of Erskine. Maybe it's not resident, but maybe they need to be an active farmer with I don't know, PID, I don't know.
Well, you could have individuals bordering, like that are farms across the road from our county, and they have land on both sides and have, you know, and could be very active within our communities.
And those guys are good.
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing the guys that, you know, they come out of the, and I'll say it, they come out of the city and they have land and they aren't here. They aren't part of our community. All they're doing is making requests that are sometimes a little exoneration or exaggerated is what I'm trying to say.
The other one to look at too is specifically our McMaster's pit, which is just outside the county of Stettler in Camrose. The top 3 bids were kicked out because they weren't Stettler ratepayers or residents, but they're residents of Camrose where the land is being owned. It's a kick in the pants. They're also, just like Mr. Clark said, like those are neighbors to that area, like so. And back when this was made, we didn't have land outside the county.
That one, I think, is an anomaly. Personally, I think you should be a county resident to rent land in the county. But if we have land outside the county, maybe you need to be a resident of the county that it's in or the county of Stettler. You know, because we don't have a lot of land outside the county we rent out, but maybe that one needs a separate clause. Mr. Stevens.
I'm sympathetic to the case that Larry's giving, that particular example. And someone with close ties to the community, been here generations in that instance, and has land on two counties, just happens to be on the neighboring one. I'm sympathetic, and I agree that that person should have an equal shot. I'm just hesitant how it can be worded. If we have a corporate farm that owns land in 4 different counties, and they come in because they'll buy anything that's up for sale, and they are high bid on all of our leases. They pay taxes and they take it all. How do we word it to get one, but not have the wholesale corporate farm take over?
That's a very valid point. We had 3 different corporate farms approach me with huge interest, and when, as soon as they read the ratepayer had to be a resident of Stellar, pulled out of bidding, but we would have had a massive amount of bidding going on. Maybe it's got to be reworded. Maybe you have to live, and I'm just pulling numbers out, but maybe you have to live within a township of where that land is to be able to bid on it.
Okay, but
And I'm just using it, you know what I mean?
But okay, so the way we've got this worded, right now, we might be off board too, because can a corporation be a resident of your municipality? And there's many corporate farms out there right now that are, so are they a resident of the county of Stellar?
Absolutely.
Well, are they? I don't know. Where's their
Physically live.
their family physically, and the owners of the corporation physically live there, but where is the corporation based out of? Could be your law,
You can have your corporation based out
is
of
your law.
office in,
Well, we have to be careful on that with our dealings with everybody, because we're just dealing with an issue with Lagoon North.
Yeah.
And that individual does not live within our county, but is very active in our area with the land base.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with them on a daily, not a daily basis, but a monthly basis or a yearly basis. So you got to treat everybody.
His corporation might be at his property in wherever.
The other city lives within Alberta or in the US, you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, your corporation the head office of your corporation
Could be anywhere.
Anywhere. I know guys that used to set up for tax havens, set up their corporation business out of a box office number out of Quebec because they got more grants for their funding for it.
So there
But
does,
they were residents of Statler, lived here.
I think there needs to be more conversation on it, because especially with what we're bringing up to the fact that we did give that first right of refusal.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we refer this to a committee of the whole meeting, that we can sit down, administration can bring back a few ideas for us. Because we've got a 5-year window on this, so we've got a little bit of time, but it definitely needs some more discussion. So if we can bring it to a session of the committee of the whole, I think it's worth us, apparently, to have a little bit of conversation around it. Give everybody a little bit of time to think and talk and go from there.
Yeah, there's been good discussion on it. Okay, Mr. Nyberg moved that we bring this for further discussion to a committee of the whole. All in favor? Carried. Okay. 11.1 on the agenda. It's the Provincial ASB Committee Report from Brenda Knight, Central Region Representative, on page 25. Was there anything from the report that requires further discussion from the board?
I just like the fact that we're getting this. I think it's.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important, and I guess we certainly thank Brenda Knight for her contributions of keeping us up to date on what's happened provincially.
Mr. Chairman, I'll give you a receipt for information.
Okay, James has moved to receive that report for information. All in favor? Carried. 11.2 is the Clean Farm letter to the Provincial ASB Committee on page 28. So this one, there's some changes in this program, Mr. Quinton, for Clean Farm.
Yeah, there's changes. At provincial conference, a few of these things were highlighted. I guess to kind of streamline it, egg retailers, so your UFA, your Nutrient. Who else do we have? We're gonna have Don Rasmussen, whatever his group is called. Those are probably the big ones. Co-op, I guess, would have a little bit in there. They are going to, just like we've talked about, have to collect on their site what you buy from them. And it's unsure right now, which I'm not sure why it's unsure, but there should have been like a deposit like on pop cans. So you pay an extra however much, you get that money back, and you get your jug returned. Otherwise, I do see us having garbage on the land again. What they've done is they've set it up over a 4-year plan. Certain ones will be closing down, certain sites will be closing down, start recycling the little guys first at the retailer site. Going off of their weight category, we are around that medium site, so we're projected to stop collecting at the end of 2024. Curtis Construction informed me they will still collect. We asked them to. Probably at a cost. Never said that. He said he won't leave us high and dry. Guys are still taking to the transfer site. He'll still come out and collect there. Because he doesn't see this working very well either. I don't know where UFA is going to store however many thousands of pounds of plastic jugs waiting on a compact. I get the idea. I can't see how they're going to execute it.
Larry?
Justin. So this came up at the past waste management meeting as well. And it seems like when this rule was changed to put it back on the distributors or producers of the plastic, there is a huge educational portion missing for the public. And there is, I've heard the rumblings, and I think as the date gets closer, it'll only increase from some of these distributors in our area. I don't think the UFAs and PV marts are prepared or necessarily have a cohesive plan to start handling all this plastic when it comes in. And I don't think the general public is aware that this is coming and that it isn't intended at a certain date to go to the landfill and transfer stations. And I would like at the next ASB convention for us to appeal to the province to help with that educational portion to get this out, because this is not necessarily our rule, but we're going to have to deal with all the consequences. And I think if they're going to change the rules, they need to help with the advertising that this is happening.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, sorry, but for clarification on that, was the town, they have any opinion on like development permits? Because I'll tell you what, like this isn't something that you just, throw these cans out in the back 40 and say, okay, they're fine, and there's, run off into the neighbor's property, especially within a what I will call a town or city environment where stormwater management is so important, because it's not like our transfer site where we've got a burn container and it stays put in place, where these places, we all know that the runoff that comes off a city or town is way, that's why they have stormwater management plans, right?
Are you suggesting that there's not water sampling wells around every business like there is our landfills and transfer stations?
Yes.
There isn't controls in place. I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but the impression was at the Waste Management Committee, everyone was kind of caught off guard and looking at the immediate impacts on us. I don't think it had made it to the point where, what is this going to do to every business? What are the planning impacts for the communities, for these businesses? I think it was still that reactionary phase as opposed to looking at all the side effects.
Hey, Marlene, have you got in the minutes reflecting Justin's suggestion that we at some point take this to the ASB conference? Okay, thank you. We have Larry and Quentin.
Just one comment on it is right now, it's that old thing, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it, because you drive around the land and you'll see boxes that have empty containers in them. But then shortly after they're picked up, and then you see the accumulation at our transfer sites. This worries me that it's going to end up sitting there, blowing into ditches, going other places because of having to haul it to a different spot. So I think the flushing, everybody's pretty much in habit with that, do the triple flush or whatever, but I just see us having a whole bunch being left on fields if this happens.
Okay, Quentin, then James.
A little background information for you guys. We, the board, we, the County and Stettler Board, and we, the Provincial Ag Service Board, asked for this in 2021. The board said enough. It cost us money to pick up someone else's problem. Therefore, the resolution went forward saying someone else has to clean up their own garbage. That's why Clean Farms did this. We asked for this. And I fully get it.
We did.
UFA and whoever else doesn't have room to store.
But
Not only these drugs, right? Drugs aren't just going into a transfer site anymore. I have sitting at the landfill a roll of plastic bags. I don't know how big they are. I'm assuming they're probably an 8-foot wide, 20-foot long bag. You fill up, you tie off, and when they come, they load it, they take it, and they compress it down and compact that stuff up. Where are you going to store all these? I just tweaked our program from using a 24-foot trailer that we threw the jugs on by hand and took weeks to clean up jugs, using a front end loader and a gravel truck when they weren't spreading gravel. Man, did that speed that up. And now I got these big bags I got to deal with. We asked for it. And they gave us exactly what we asked for.
What you asked for.
So now we're stuck to take this back to the provincial conference. Oh man. We are gonna look like we got egg on our face.
Okay, but we gotta tell them that it's not working.
Realism is that
When the rubber hits the road.
a lot of guys use totes, and there's deposit on totes, so they'll take it back, bigger guys, but there's still a pile of 23-liter bales up there.
We're a huge contributor, county instead itself.
Yeah.
That's all we use because I have nowhere for barrels or totes. I can't put that kind of thing into my bay for use. However, a better system is needed. This isn't the right system, I don't think. All that aside, Curtis Construction did tell me they're not going to leave us high and dry. If we still find guys needing somewhere to put them, even if it's UFA, get rid of the Blyamore site, get rid of the Dunelda site. No problem, UFA. Take them to the Stettler transfer site. There's a cage set up. Put your bags in there. We'll handle it. We can maybe work something out. But we asked for this.
Just if I could quickly, Now, and I haven't investigated into the whole, this program, but now, so I'm Home Hardware downtown, nowhere, and I sell small jugs of,
That's not ag retail.
okay, so it only has to be ag retail.
This is
Typically for ag retail, I don't even know if they use the word herbicide, pesticide and fertilizer. This is ag retail,
okay, fair enough. So
but those guys throw that in the recycling or the garbage, right? And I say those guys like saying you people, but when we're collecting pesticide and fertilizer containers at the transfer sites, we're not seeing domestic use anything. We're not finding the ambigons, we're not finding the 1 in 4 liter bottle of Roundup or 2,4-D or the old turf and grow, right? The old fertilizer and weed control mixture. We're not seeing that. You find it over in the burn pit, you find it in a broken bag of garbage, but we're not finding it when we pick up the fertilizer and pesticide jugs, which is great, because that's cumbersome on its own. And I agree, the guys are a whole lot better at rinsing their jugs. Triple rinsing was a rule. No caps, no labels, triple rinse. Guys got the triple rinse down pat, no problem. They totally forgot about the lids and they totally forgot about the labels. When those things go through the chippers, that all has to come off. When those things go through the compressor, those have to come off. Who's doing that? My guys.
That's communication too, then.
It's on the same time with the rinse part.
I'd be one of the guilty party on that.
But when they come into a UFA or a PV market, they will have somebody there, an attendant beside them. So you're gonna see, I still see people coming to us for the convenience of it. And I'll tell you what, you're done spraying at 8 o'clock, right? What are you gonna do? You're gonna throw it in a bag and then the next morning, you're not going into town. You're gonna drive right past Erskine. No, you'll pull into Erskine.
Justin's waiting to get into.
Sorry.
But aren't these transfer sites manned?
yeah, but they're not policed. There's a difference between
Between manned and policed.
okay,
I don't think that we'll get away from this mentality. I think the way that provincial and federal governments are very much leaning, it is putting, quote unquote, the pollution, these plastic containers, back to the producers. That's the trend, and I don't think that that's going away. They're moving this direction with many environmental issues, putting it back to the producers. So I don't think that we'll ever get away from this rule. And I'm not suggesting at ASB we throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I don't think that's a winning strategy. They're not repealing this. This, I believe, is probably here to stay. But I do think it's fair to look at policies when they come into effect to minimize side effects and to help with the educational portion, which it is perfectly valid. And I don't think that that necessarily puts egg on our face to the extent, no. We can deal with this policy. There is an end game, but we need help on A, B, and C. It's not necessarily going there asking for them to get rid of the rule wholesale. If asking you to help in the advertising when you change the rules is perfectly fair request.
And I further to what Justin said too, though, is that we did request this because we felt like, why should the municipalities be burdened with the cost and the workload of handling all this plastic recyclables from herbicides and things when we're getting reimbursed for it? It should be the guys that are selling it and making the money. So that was the general thing. But on that hand, if UFA chose that it was just too difficult to collect them and have a place to store them in town, perhaps if it's their responsibility, but they could pay the county to do it at our sites or something like that.
You're talking like a capitalist now.
But I mean, it's passing the buck, but the ones that are making the money off it should be the ones that are responsible for it. And if they can't do it themselves, they could farm it out. And if the municipalities are set up for it, with some dollars, maybe we could make a deal. And Mr. Clark?
I just have a question for you. Is Bert gonna start taking the mattresses back? And the washing machines and the dryers and the.
So they,
Absolutely, end of life, that's how it has to be getting to.
It isn't.
There isn't, but we have to work to that end. And at RMA, they were talking about that, and that's where we have to go. End of life has to be a producer responsibility. These guys, and I'll tell you what changes in that is how they package this crap. Walmart, for example, I mean, they will take, since they've come to one of their Walmarts came to a zero or a net zero garbage building. The packaging, Walmart would say to you, you would get a USB clip that was smaller than this pen, and it would come in a package this big. Well, plastic around it that big. There was a reason for that, is it was because of theft. But now that Walmart had to dispose of that stuff, then they were going, well, no, we want the smaller packaging. We will deal with the security at a different way. And that's what has to happen to these things. If you build a product that cannot be recycled, I can build this cup out of something. There's 1,000 different items that you can make it out of steel, you can make it out of wood, you can make it out of concrete. But what is the most recyclable product? We've seen that in utensils, plastic utensils, right? Pretty hard to recycle, but you can make them out of wood. You can make straws out of paper. Do I agree with it? I hate them, but they are very much more recyclable than the plastic ones. I get it.
It happens when you're using them.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, exactly. They dissolve in your mouth.
You have to drink very fast.
Yeah. Okay. Any more comments? Okay, so
Question for clarity, am I, is there a letter coming out of this, or is this just the information we're doing right now? Where are we at?
Mr. Chairman, I think to this end, maybe we should send a letter to the provincial board to ask for a little bit more clarity of what they see as happening with this. How do they see this rolling out? Are we supposed to close our transfer sites? Is that what they're saying?
whatever the clarity is, their piece would have to follow with the education.
Yes,
you know.
absolutely. Can we close our transfer sites? Is that what they're seeing with this coming forward? Or do we just, as of, what date is it? We just shut our doors and say, no, we're not taking plastic jugs? You know where that's gonna end up.
I don't think they're gonna haul them from Bymore Indian all the way up to you.
Well,
But that's where they buy them.
I know,
So they have to drive them back.
I'm sorry, I don't see the complexity.
well, if you see how they come in sometimes, it's a,
And if you see.
What
how-
they're used to hauling.
It's pretty easy to haul full jugs in the vehicle, they don't wanna pull them all over, but pretty more difficult to haul empty jugs.
absolutely.
Well, you could say it becomes our problem.
And it's stock trailers, there are lots of guys do stock trailers because they don't blow away in them.
Chair,
I guess it,
out of curiosity, have you ever seen empty cans or pop bottles in the ditches
Yeah, that's
and
one
on the
thing.
sidewalks? It is super easy to take those into a recycle
You
station.
take it back to where you buy it.
Yeah, no, these are well-established systems that have been in place for decades, and yet compliance is still an issue. We can drive outside of town.
But you don't see car batteries in the ditch.
Yeah, you do.
You see lots of pallets sitting at farms with car batteries.
You betcha, yeah.
Well, then that's.
Unfortunately, you do.
I'm just saying that the
You're
recycling
getting the
of
value, anybody can get the value out of them.
Recycling of cans and bottles has been readily accepted for decades. It's a well-established system. There is even a financial incentive. And yet, look at our compliance. We see those, we can drive to any street or any roadway in this county, and you will find them. And that's when it's been in place for decades. So I think we're downplaying how quick the compliance is going to come in on this change.
And maybe that's something we do is keep our transfer sites our waste transfer sites, they're not ours, they're waste management. But when UFA runs out of room, sure, we'll take a trailer load at one of us.
that might be wise to transition, because this isn't gonna transition quickly. Because Like it takes a while to teach old dog new tricks sort of
Yeah,
thing,
2 years to figure it out.
but it's
Clarity and education has to be done.
eventually, it probably is a good idea to move that direction eventually, but it's just gonna take a while, I think, to get everybody educated and in compliance.
Well, in our county connections, absolutely.
I mean, it's a little bit ahead of the game yet if it's 2024 and UFA is ready, so
It's a year and a half away. It's the time to talk about
I
it.
guess,
It's.
I guess to let them know it's coming.
cycles, Actually, is what
Yeah,
it is.
2 seasons were there.
But you
Go,
know,
Mr. Gender.
go ahead, Mr. Gender.
And here reminds me of the Boar resolution that we were bringing up to the RME, that it's only going to be allowed to open to certain hunters. There was, we finally said, to hell with it, we just open it up, everything's going to be happening. And this one here, I find that we should be keeping these sites open at their waste management also. Everything to build and collect the garbage is going to be a bonus for us.
The only problem I see with that, Mr. Gender, is people will just, we are, by human nature, we follow a path over and over. We will never, ever be done with it because there will always be that one individual that continues to bring it to our transfer site. And what we've done is we've taken an issue and just spread it out over more area instead of solving the problem, our problem of getting rid of the problem and letting someone else deal with it. That's the problem. If we leave it open, they will use it and we will still, maybe at a lesser degree, but we will still have to man it. We'll still have to be there and we will still have to spend time picking up jugs. And our whole goal was to get out of this business.
Something that, when I was coming to Stellar the other day, on 855 Belkey Pond, at the entrance to Belkey Pond, somebody dumped a pile of recyclable bottles. Like, why would you dump them on that roadway when they're worth
Maybe they
money?
fell out of there, maybe they blew out of the bag out of the back of the truck.
The donation to clean up the pond.
Or they opened the door, they were sitting there.
Well, that's what I think. They opened the door and they kicked him out, is what they did. Anyway, so I guess we've got this one to death. We will draft a letter to get, and I mean, Marlene has already noted on the minutes, so when in future, if we do need to do a resolution, we've noted that too. So if there's no further discussion, I guess we need a mover for this Clean Farms letter. Mr. Clark, move it to accept for information. All those in favor?
Favor?
Okay, our next meeting is May 25th. And
Adjournment?
if there's nothing else, we have nothing to discuss, so we'll ask for a motion to adjournment. And I got a pretty good idea who might make that motion.
Adjournment, please.
Mr. Grover moves. All in favor? Carried.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too, Dave.